Everybody, welcome to the NC State Insider Podcast. I'm your host and lead beat writer for NC State on SI, Tucker Sennett, here joining you the morning after NC State went to Durham and lost to the Duke Blue Devils 45-33, the Wolfpack's first loss of the 2025 season. It was quite a game. A lot of unbelievable plays, a lot of just back and forth swings throughout the night, and it really felt like NC State, after all that talk of wanting to play a complete game, played maybe its most incomplete game to date, which is certainly not an ideal trend, as they looked to be kind of bucking that way of playing games throughout the last 2 weeks, slowly improving, but it all kind of fell apart today. So I just wanted to give you, as I always do, the sights and sounds of the game. I was there in Durham. So if you weren't able to make the trip or you watched on TV and just want to hear more about Wallace Wade Stadium, here you are. Um, to put it simply, it was really hot once again, and it was a 4 o'clock kick, so the heat certainly had an effect on both teams. I would imagine early, both offenses were operating at a fairly high level early in the game, and that heat just it can have an effect on a defense over the course of a game and slow you down. But let's jump ahead a little bit to the game that everybody's going to be talking about, or the play that everybody's going to be talking about this week, and that was the non-offsides call, the CJ Bailey interception at the end of the first half. NC State's leading 20-14, driving down the field, looking to take at least a 9 point lead, with a field goal, as they were in field goal range, not 100% with the kicking situation for NC State, which continues to be a problem after a couple clean weeks. That I think that was something Dave Doran was really disappointed in, as well as just the special teams performance as a whole. Um, it was really bad, and NC State lost a game today that they actually didn't punt in, which is pretty that's remarkable, because it just means your drives are ending on turnovers, or scores. And they did score a lot, but the turnovers were costly, and they did get some stops on those turnovers. But this one play felt like it shifted the whole game. And it's 4th and 3. CJ Bailey goes out there with the offense. Um, Dave Doran explained after the game that this was hard count play, where the main goal is to get the other team to jump off sides, and that the center, Jalen Grant in this case, is only supposed to snap the ball if he feels as though one of the defenders has jumped or is in the neutral zone. On the right side of the defensive line, Vincent Anthony Jr. appeared to go. This is a kid who's really fast twitch. He gets off the ball really fast. Um, and he appeared to jump. Grant snaps the ball. Bailey's kind of discombobulated with it. He's looking for somebody up the seam. Two receivers on the far side are looking at the sideline. They weren't ready for the play. They were anticipating Doran just calling timeout and kicking the field goal here. Bailey fires a pass, picked off by the Duke linebacker, and run back to the NC State 12. Duke scores just 3 plays later and takes, instead of trailing by 6 or 9, more likely at the half, they're up 1 with the ball coming into the second half. They receive, and you could just feel the momentum completely shift the other way. It was basically the worst possible ending to the half that you could draw up if you were NC State, knowing that you were giving them the ball to start the second half. And to be honest, the team just looked deflated on the sideline from that point on. It was just a point of frustration, and disappointment, and they just really couldn't recover, certainly defensively. Another problem defensively was Kean Sloan was sort of needed today to take on a big load with Sebastian Harsh not playing in the first half of the game, and he only made it 12 snaps. He was carted off the sideline all the way to the far Duke. Duke has a really far visiting locker room. It's across a full practice field. So the cart might not necessarily have been because the injury was that serious and more because Sloan they didn't want Sloan to have to walk basically 150 yards to get to the locker room. Um, so that was unfortunate. The defense didn't really play connected after he left. They looked really lost on some of these big plays by Duke quarterback Darian Mensah, and Mensah sort of just sucked the air out of a pretty good Wolfpack road crowd again. There was a lot of red in that stadium. They brought a very strong fan contingent down from Raleigh, just a half hour away, and they left disappointed. It was just that whole second half. It felt like a slow collapse, and they couldn't get anything going when they needed to on either side of the ball. And the offense had a chance. They cut it to 5 points late in the fourth quarter. It was a long drive that I kind of kept saying to the people around me, like, this is taking a little too long. And I know they had all three timeouts and the 2 minute warning, but it just dragged just that little bit too long. And then they got him to a third down and sold out against the run. And Kenny Soares Jr., who had played much better football than I think a lot of people expected over the last 2, 3 games, just completely blew his assignment in the gap, and Duke running back Anderson Castle took off uncontested, basically through a hole for a 66-yard touchdown to essentially ice the game and cap things off for Duke in this win. You- Going back and watching the play and watching it live, it looked like Soares just really just went the wrong direction, got hung up on somebody else and guessed wrong, and they're gone. And this has sort of been the issue with this NC State defense is they just allow explosive plays that end up scoring touchdowns. And Dave Doran spoke about that after the game and how that just is not acceptable moving forward for this team because you're not going to win games. And quite frankly, the competition only gets stiffer after the next 2 weeks when you got Virginia Tech and Campbell. Virginia Tech probably is in for a long week in terms of players sort of stepping away from the program as they still deal with the fallout of the Brent Pry firing. And then Campbell's FCS opponent. Both of those are home games, so they'll get to reset over the next couple weeks and hopefully, for their sake, head into that Notre Dame road trip 5-1 because it's going to be really tough for this NC State team to go bowl eligible if they lose to Virginia Tech or Campbell given what's coming at them down the pipe schedule wise. The Wolfpack still face you got Notre Dame, then you got Miami on the schedule, you got Georgia Tech on the schedule, and you got Florida State on the schedule. There are games also against Pitt on the road. That's a tough road environment, and you finish the season obviously against North Carolina, who have continued to really struggle against other Power Five competition. But that it really will come down to that North Carolina game if they're not able to beat any of those other teams. So, what looked like it could be a more promising season than I think a lot of people expected has ended up turning into what's going to be a slog to 7 wins in an ideal world. And this was one you had to have if you had aspirations of being a better team in 2025. And I think they just let it slip. That's really all you can say. Duke certainly played to what their expectations were, at least offensively. I think they still have some defensive issues to work out, but they basically finally played a clean game, whereas NC State had been playing the clean games up to that point, and they just flipped the script. And CJ Bailey was put in a position he hasn't had to be in this season, which is, can you win NC State a football game with your arm? Because they've been able to kind of squeak by on defensive plays and on the back of Hollywood Smothers at times. And Bailey's been really, really good. And he did play well for certain large segments of the game yesterday, but it never looked like he was comfortable when they got that far behind. And that's a tough position to be in for a young quarterback is being just basically completely relied on to go and win this game. And that was the situation he was in. He turned the ball over 4 times, which I think everybody agreed can't happen on this NC State team. And I'm sure Bailey was the first one to take accountability for it. But it's just it was a shocking game to watch, just given the second half implosion by this NC State team that had played so well in the second halves of games. To me, it's hard to point at one play that makes the difference, but it felt like they were shell shocked by that offsides interception and going into the half down one. That's what it felt like. That's the main thing I got for sights and sounds. We will have more coverage of the loss throughout the week. Um, I will do my best to keep you guys in the loop on the fallout of the loss and then also get you prepped for this Virginia Tech game on Saturday over the course of the week. As always, if you want more content, you can follow my X account at Senate Tucker, the website's X account at Wolfpack on SI. You can follow my assistant beat writer, Daniel Rios, at Daniel_Rios72. Um, and then you can find more of these podcast episodes on the Sports Videos on SI YouTube channel. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow.